Here we go. So great to have everybody on today. My name's Kelvin Chin. This is the first of an ongoing series that we're going to be doing every month on the 30th of every month. That's why I decided to call it the monthly 30th Q&A sessions. So it's easy for you to remember. It's going to be on the 30th of every month, obviously, except for February. It's going to be the last day in February, whichever day that is. It's going to be the 28th in a couple of months, and then next year is leap year. So, but 30th of every month. So the days will change somewhat. The time will be the same. It will be, it'll be the same. It'll be at 12 p.m. my time. I'm in Los Angeles, California. I know we have people here from all over the world. Figure out the time zones accordingly, 3 p.m. in the East Coast and so forth in Europe and Hawaii, and it's 10 in the morning, etc. Melbourne, Australia, I think it's around 7 in the morning there. So welcome everybody. Just a little bit, I glanced at the 70 people who registered for this session today, and about half the people are my students from either my meditation classes, or I teach a 6-part Afterlife series of classes, and about half of the people aren't, and so half the people are new to me. So just a little bit of background about myself, just a quick kind of overview. I've been teaching meditation for 50 years now. I opened up to the other side in 1986, or whatever the math is there, almost 40 years, was it 35 years or so ago, just spontaneously. My past life memories opened up in the mid-1970s. Again, all spontaneous. I've never had any past life regressions or workshops on how to communicate with the other side and so forth. So it's just a very spontaneous thing for me. I've written a couple of books. You can check them out online. We'll go, well, I'll just show them to you real quick. There's this book on overcoming the fear of death, a non-religious approach to helping people deal with death and dying and overcoming that fear. And this is a collection of 67 essays that I've written in the last 10, 15 years or so on how to live life. This is not a death and dying book. This is about living. This is about how to reduce our suffering and increase our happiness and contentment in life. 67 essays, short essays. My third book is about my past life memories, and I'm finishing that actually right now. So goes back about 6,000 years, a couple of dozen lifetimes. So that's a little bit of background about me. I've been doing this work for, for a long time, as you just heard. I have had a corporate and a legal career. I went to law school, had a corporate and legal career, raised a family and so forth. But now I've been doing this work that we're doing, and we're talking about again here together today I'm doing it again for about the last 10 years through my nonprofit. Today's focus, and ongoing each month on the 30th of each month, is going to be focused on talking about afterlife issues and also topics related to the talk that happened 8 years ago now on 30th November 2014. So that was a talk that I helped organize. It happened in Alexandria, Virginia. It was live streamed around the world at the time 8 years ago. And if you have not yet seen that talk, I strongly recommend that you go to 30thnovember.com. You have to put the TH in there, 30thnovember.com. Type that out and watch that talk. You'll probably have to watch it in segments. It's 3 hours long. It's a very long talk, very in-depth, given by George Hammond, my friend George Hammond. And he and I got a download. He got a download first, and then several of us got other additional downloads, we'll call them, addendums, you call them, to the download that he initially got from the other side, from the spiritual leaders of these 4 major traditions, the Judeo-Christian, Islamic, Vedic traditions. Judeo, Jewish, Christian, obviously Christianity, Islamic, and Vedic those of you who don't know, Vedic also includes Hinduism, Buddhism, and a couple of others, but the Hinduism and Buddhism is the ones that probably most people are familiar with, that are offshoots of the Vedic tradition. So the leaders of those traditions, who are all now on the other side, came to George and gave him a download, and that's what's covered in the 30th November talk. We're going to talk on an ongoing basis each month, you and I, and as this group develops and evolves and grows, about topics that came out of that talk. Okay, I'm not going to give the talk again. You can go watch that talk again yourself. And on my website, kelvinchin.org, there is a page that I call the 30th, I call it the monthly 30th Q&A page, the name of our session today, and in these ongoing sessions. And on that page, you can watch several previews of that 30th November talk if you have not yet watched that 30th November talk. Previews that I did of that talk with several of my friends who have podcasts, who have their own podcasts, and they interviewed me about that. So I want to get right into it, because today is a Q&A, and this is really an open forum on an ongoing basis monthly to you guys to ask me questions about the afterlife, or about topics that came out of the 30th November talk, or about the logistics or the structure, or how did that come about through George and so forth, the download from Jehovah, Jesus, John the Baptist, Shankara, who was also Vyasa, who wrote the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita in a previous lifetime, Swami Brahmananda Saraswati, and others. How did that come about? You can ask me questions about any of those subject areas, okay? Before we do that, I just want to say one quick thing. This is very important. How do I teach, and what are we teaching here? This is not religious. I say that to you because some of you may think, well, wait a minute, Jesus, Jehovah, a lot of people think of Jehovah as Allah or God, capital G, Yahweh, and so forth. And he has gone by many names like that in the various traditions. However, my teaching is non-religious. I don't teach from a religious doctrinal, institutional knowledge kind of base. That's not what I teach from. I teach from my own personal experiences, as I've just outlined to you in my quick bio at the beginning, and my interpretations of those experiences, and how have I thought about those to figure out, does that make sense or not make sense with this idea and that idea and so forth. That's how I teach my students to discern, to analyze spiritual concepts. And I think in a positive way, it spills over into our daily life in how we analyze all kinds of concepts and ideas and opinions and beliefs that people have that are not even spiritual or religious beliefs. So I think that discernment is really lacking in our world today. And I say that to you because that is really my goal with all of you, is to help you think about these concepts more clearly. I am not here to try to change your belief systems. And if you believe in Jehovah in a certain way, and Jesus in a certain way, or Shankara or whoever, or Buddha in a certain way, I respect that. This is not about trying to change people's opinions or belief systems about any of these ideas that I'm talking about. I'm sharing with you my perceptions and hopefully help to bring you a little bit more clarity and maybe a different perspective and approach to looking at things. That's my objective, okay? I have zero agenda in terms of trying to help to people, change their beliefs about stuff. No. You need to develop your own beliefs based on your own experiences and your own interpretations. And to me, that's what personal self-development is all about. That's what our eternal journey to me is all about. So I am here to help you if you want that help. But if you feel that you have it figured out yourself, then you should respect and honor that within yourself. Okay, I hope that's clear. Good, so let's open it up to questions. People have any questions they just want to throw out? Hopefully you've had some thought that, beforehand to prepare some questions. By the way, we're going to go about 90 minutes today. This is not going to be a 2 or 3, 4 hour marathon like some of my sessions have gone in the past, because I want to do this on a monthly basis with you guys. And I want to give you time to think and assimilate and then come up with further questions. Even if I may have answered your question in this session, between now and the next month, you may have a variation on that same question or different questions. So I want to keep it to a fairly, reasonable length of time, about 90 minutes approximately. So write down your questions. If we don't get to your questions, don't worry. We'll have other opportunities every month. Okay? Good. So who wants to go first, Anne-Marie?
Kelvin, do you want them to type, or can they just ask you directly?
They can ask me directly if they want to ask me directly, and if they feel comfortable going on camera. If they don't have to.
Okay.
They can just verbally ask. It doesn't matter to me. But yeah, I'll let you monitor the video part.
Okay.
Hey,
I don't
Cal.
have any questions so far.
Yeah, is that you, Cayman?
It's me. Yeah, I'll go first.
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
After all we've talked about in person, these monthlies do help me process questions that I have that I wouldn't have in person, or maybe I had in person and I still have. But so two things, but one is that the download you're talking about, or the other side, that in general is, you've used the term whisperings before. Is this primarily thought, or you're not getting a vision of what the other side these people aren't in a location, right? You've mentioned light beings, but not what the background looks like, or what, if they're in a committee, where are they sitting somewhere? That's a
Yeah, so you have a bunch of different questions in there. It's a good, yeah. So you come back and revisit whichever ones that I don't get to.
Yeah.
I'll try to keep track, but feel free to come back.
Yeah.
I actually, sometimes I say this to people. Sometimes I'll write down, you'll see me writing stuff down if somebody asks me a question. That way I can kind of keep track of which parts of the questions I'm answering and which I haven't gotten to yet. But so what's it look like? So it depends. These communications, what I call, as you say, I call them whisperings from the other side. They can come in all different forms. So very often for me, they come in a mental telepathic way, and the only way I just describe it is mental telepathy. So I hear in my mind, and I have been able to discern, because it started happening, remember, in 1986 for me. For me personally, this started happening in 1986. So at first I wasn't sure. It's like, is that me talking to myself? Is that me making it up? Whatever. So, but since it's been going on for so long, now I can more easily and more clearly discern and distinguish, is it just me having a thought, or is that something outside of me, a mind that is not my mind talking? So that's a point of discernment and distinction that came for me anyway, over time, probably over like, a year or something like that, where I was kind of questioning what was going on, because I'm a very skeptical person. And so when this started happening to me in 1986, I was like, huh, what's going on here? Too many Star Trek movies or something, whatever. So for George, George has similar experiences to your question about him and the whisperings that he got. We'll call them whisperings from the other side. But my experience also is sometimes I'll have visual. And so sometimes, to answer your question, Cayman, yeah, I can see the other side. And I could see at times the committee, I call them the committee, in George's talk on the 30th November talk, he calls them the holy tradition. And that term, probably, those two words probably need some clarification. It doesn't mean holy in the way that I grew up Christian. First of all, my background, I grew up Christian, Protestant, and so forth. So in that Christian tradition, holy has a certain kind of very almost, the level of reverence, and so the level of the religiosity, you might call it, is pretty intense when you use the word holy in the Christian and probably other traditions too. But in the Vedic tradition, holy does have a reverential contextual meaning to it, but really just refers to the lineage of teachers that came before oneself. That's what holy tradition refers to. So when George and I, when he in the 30th November talk talks about seeing the holy tradition, or I talk about, me, those of you who don't know me, I try to distill things down more to like 21st century language. So I just call them the committee. So it's like there's this little group, the committee. And interestingly, George and I and this other guy named John Moore, who we didn't know, had his own visitations about this whole talk and so forth before George and I had even met John Moore or heard about him. The three of us separately had the same vision of this committee, what I'm calling the committee. Jehovah, Jesus, Shankara, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who was also John the Baptist, and he was also the prophet Elijah before that, etc., and Swami Brahmananda Saraswati and so forth. It's about 10 of 15 or so of them, something like that. We had the same vision of them, and what we would see initially was the person who was talking to us, whichever one of the group was talking, addressing us initially. We could see them in the foreground, and then kind of behind them, and for me, it was kind of like in rows, It's like you had the soccer team, and like, okay, we're going to take a picture of the soccer team, it's like that. And the coach is up front, okay, and then you got the soccer, that kind of, or the captain of the soccer team in front. It was kind of like that is the way I would describe in 21st century lingo what it looked like to each of us when the committee would come and talk, and then another one would come up and talk, they'd take turns and so forth, kind of a thing. But we're seeing them. So to your question, is there a place there? Yeah, there's a place, but it's not like place like how we think of place here, but there's place in terms of locality. And I think this is an important point in terms of a teaching point, in terms of the afterlife, because a lot of times people will say, you'll hear people in workshops and spiritual leaders and podcasts and whatever, conferences, they'll say, there's no time on the other side. Yes, there is time. They'll say there's no time and space on the other side. Yeah, there is. They're just not understanding what time means and what space means. Time and space being, it's just local. First of all, location just means that there is a locality that can be identified by some individuality being in a space. It doesn't mean that there are buildings or no buildings. That's the way most people think of space. Well, there aren't any buildings. I didn't see any buildings, and I didn't see any cars and stuff, so there's no space. No, space is a term of locality. Time is a measurement of change. That's what time is. So when you hear people come back from the other side, I'm digressing from your question a little bit to make this teaching point came in, but it's an important teaching point because you hear this misunderstanding all the time. Every conference I've ever been to, I've heard at least a half a dozen or a dozen people saying this, and some of them are on stage saying this. And I don't get in their face. I'm respectful. I'm not going to go up and raise my hand in the audience or saying you don't know what you're talking about. But there is time on the other side, because time is a measurement of change. Time can be subjectively experienced, but it is not a subjective experience. That may sound the same to you if you're not listening carefully. Time can be subjectively experienced, but time is not merely a subjective experience. Most people and many spiritual leaders out there get those two concepts confused. And this is what I'm teaching you guys, is to think more clearly so that you can think about ideas, not just spiritual stuff, but in your daily life more clearly. So what do I mean by that? Time is experienced subjectively, but it's not a subjective experience. Have you ever been on vacation before? Anybody? How many people have ever been on vacation and you're at the beach, or you're in the woods, or you're in the mountains? Some people are mountain people, some people are beach people, so whatever. You're off having a good time is the point for that whole week. And then Sunday rolls around and it's like, we got to get on a plane tomorrow or tonight. and I got to show up at work, at the office or the warehouse or the whatever tomorrow morning, Monday. Where did the week go? That's time being experienced subjectively very differently from when you're punching the clock at the warehouse or at your office or whatever, right? Or for those in the audience who are younger, sitting in classroom at your university, or God forbid your high school or junior high school, where you're like, yeah, let me get out of here. I want to go play with my friends. You know, time can be experienced subjectively. That doesn't mean that time didn't exist. Time is not a subjective experience that exists or doesn't exist just because it's subjective. That's my point, right? Because you experience time subjectively in school or at work or in vacation very differently. Time still existed when you were in Hawaii on the beach on vacation. Trust me. Plants were still growing, people were still breathing, traffic was still moving, even though you weren't aware of it. Okay? So time still exists on the other side when we die because change still exists. Who is the medium talking to? I've heard mediums at conferences on the stage saying that there is no time on the other side. Excuse me, who are you talking to on the other side? You're not talking to cosmic soup. You're talking to individual souls. Either they've died and you're talking to them, or you're talking to some angelic being. I define angels as those who have never been incarnated before in physical form. Or you're talking to somebody. You're talking to some individual mind, some consciousness. If individuality exists on the other side, then change must exist, right? It absolutely must exist. These are principles that are not subjective principles. That's objective, okay? And so yes, time and space exists on the other side, but it's experienced very differently, Cayman. And so my experience of communicating, back to your question, with the other side has been very different at different times, right? And I think those of you who had experiences communicating with the other side would probably corroborate that your experience may be different at different times, experiencing with the other side, communicating with the other side. There's other parts to that question, Cayman?
Just the background. I just wondered if you, as you get a sense of their individuality, other than the light being with I'm just picturing from what you've said, a dark background, or is there an actual background?
It depends.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes
you don't get a tour. No, they don't give you a tour like, hey, this is our
like
foyer and this is our.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Exactly. This is the living room and this is the the backyard and
right.
Yeah, the swing set's over here. Yeah, no, it's like I think for me, and when we first was having experience communicating with what we call the movement, that group, or what I call the committee on the other side, it was more like that because the focus was on the communication, not on the place where they were. Right. I've had separate experiences from on the other side where it's you can see the light and it's very bright light, vibratory, everything's energy. So and it can take a form. The energy can take a form and can look like a thing. Like this is a thing, we call it a glass of water. Could you have a glass of water on the other side? Yeah. So that could be. But personally, for me, a lot of my experience, because I think I'm more mental than probably most of the 8 billion human beings on planet Earth. I mean, I am more mentally focused. I'm a philosopher, thinker kind of guy, right? So I am very familiar and comfortable with energy in terms of mental energy, which is really what we are when we biologically die, right? And so personally, my experience is more of that it's like a light field of energy, and then I have communications with beings, but I don't have a physical biological body. That's my personal thing. So I'm saying it's all over the map. Those of you who are more into, like, I want to get in a car. because Anne Marie has told me about her son. You know, AJ's, is it AJ? Is that his initials? Yeah. AJ tragically passed away. I can't remember, it's about 10 years ago or something like that. And he has come to her and showed her he's in and out of a car. It's a car. It's a light being. It's a light car. It's a light energy car. He's a light being getting in and out of a car that he can show her, and going to help. And he happens to. One of the things he happens to do is help young people transition and transition over young children who've died. I get emotional even telling that story, Anne Marie. It's so touching, you know. But that's an example. Came in of, you know, they can show us more physical energy. It's not physical in the way we think of physicality here, like dense glass of water that I can tap on and make a noise. It's more like physical energy, because energy is physical. Light is measurable. And so a physicist would say that light is measurable. Now, most of us would say, light, is that physical? We would not think of light as a physical form. We think of physical forms more as these hard things, these more densely vibrating things. But they're all molecules and atoms and molecules and small particles vibrating. And those small particles, I'm just generally referring to as light, as energy, okay? So that is measurable. It is identifiable. And it's equally identifiable on the other side, albeit it's vibrating at a different frequency than the world that we're living in biologically right now. Does that make sense?
That's the second part of my question.
Yeah.
Is that was space. Time, the question was, Maharishi, that when he gets back to the other side, having incarnated more, you know, multiple times, does he have more access to his John the Baptist personality than he would have when he's immersed in being alive, incarnated on this side? So the time there is, I would think, is more of eternity runs backwards and forwards. I mean, you could reach back to, and if you haven't incarnated a lot of times, you've never mentioned, some of these guys haven't incarnated a whole bunch of times. So they have a sort of a different personality, I would think, from not having been here a bunch of times.
Well, I don't know if their personality is different. I'd say their experience base is
Their
different.
experience, yeah.
Yeah, their experience base is different.
They're the way they come across to you, or I don't know.
No,
Not
well,
really.
no, the way they come across to me is their personality comes across to me when they're communicating with me. So I feel I experience their personality. But here's the other point: the eternity running forward and backwards. No, eternity just means uninfluenced by the continuum of change. That's the definition of eternity. Eternity cannot be experienced.
Okay.
We can only experience the field of change. We can conceptually talk about the concept of eternity, and we can get very close to experiencing something that, you know, very, very, we could call it a very refined or different level, different degree of the continuum of change. But the definition of eternity is that which exists outside the continuum of change. That said, in the continuum of change, which is only what we can experience then, this goes to your point, okay, I'm taking it step by step, is within the field of change, there is a past, present, and future. So to your question about Maharishi, having had a previous lifetime as John the Baptist, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi lived in the 20th century. If those of you don't know that, he lived, and I studied with him personally, both when he was Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and when he was John the Baptist 2,000 years ago, and he was Elijah before that, okay? The prophet Elijah, those of you who know anything in the Bible. So again, I am not a biblical scholar, but I know enough because you guys, some of you, like you came and have been teaching me. You and Widge and others and George and Sharon and others have been teaching me. But the point is that Does he have a little more insight? Yes, he could. He could. We could get a little bit more insight into our past. It's possible if we die and we're biologically dead and we're on the other side. Why? Because our biology eats up a lot of our energy, keeping this machine alive and healthy, fed, clothed, sheltered. That's a lot of our a lot of human energy, a lot of our energy, not human energy, a lot of our energy is consumed by maintaining our human physical biological form. All right. And so when you die, you don't have that. So you're freed up from that. And so might you have an easier ability to gain insight into the other side and so forth? Yes, you might. But here's the but though, Cayman. It's not guaranteed. It's not automatic. Because if you have a belief system that you really don't believe in reincarnation and past lives, that belief system could overshadow your ability to perceive. Because just think of it on this side. Do you know anybody? How many people in this group here know people who have belief systems on this side that prevents their ability to perceive reality clearly? I just saw you raise your hand, Ken. We know a few people like that on planet Earth who they're so firm in their belief system that it prevents their ability to perceive reality clearly, even when presented with objective facts that other people have agreed on. Okay? So might that continue on the other side? Yes. And in terms of reincarnation, yeah, sure. So it took, in Maharishi's case, now you and I studied with Maharishi, when we were in our early 20s, a couple of years ago. Right? And we know from hearing him talk that he was not a big proponent of reincarnation and past lives and so forth. What didn't mean that he has completely blocked it out, but he had some barriers, let's just say. And so when he died and he went to the other side, he told a number of us that his teacher, Swami Brahmananda Saraswati, we used to call him Gurudev because Gurudev is just an honorific term. You'll hear George use this in the 30th November talk. For those of you who haven't heard the talk yet, he refers to Maharishi's teacher as Gurudev because that's what all these teachers, all these meditation guru and teachers call their guru. Gurudev just means great exalted teacher. That's all it means. But short form, instead of saying Swami Brahmananda Saraswati every time, George just calls him Gurudev rather than say the tongue twister name. So, but Gurudev opened up Maharishi's memories to his past lives. That's when he also learned, Maharishi knew he was John the Baptist. When he was alive with us Cayman, he knew that. There's references of him referencing that on videotapes in the 1970s and maybe even the late 1960s. But he did not know about his lifetime as the Bab, who in I can't remember if it's the 1500s or something like that, 1600s, something like that, where he was the co-creator of the Baha'i faith, which is a more liberal offshoot of Islam. And he did not know about his lifetime as Shah Jahan, Maharishi's lifetime as Shah Jahan, where Shah Jahan is the Mughal emperor who was a Muslim at that time. I think that was in the 1500s or something like that, who built the Taj Mahal. I mean, most of you have heard of the Taj Mahal. Some of you have probably been to the Taj Mahal in India that Shah Jahan built in honor of his favorite wife when she died. So that's Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. That's John the Baptist. That's the prophet Elijah. That's all the same personality. So that memories were opened up to him by his teacher, Ken.
Yeah. And now we're going to talk about it on this side before we get on that side. And somebody says, hey, you were this and that.
Is there a question?
That's a question to me, from me to me. But yes, thank you.
Yeah.
For
Okay.
those two questions, right?
All right. Good. Good. Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. All right.
Yep. Thanks for getting it started.
It looks like Kirk has asked a few questions. The first part, is there any support for the possibility that an earthly married couple can continue to be married in the afterlife?
Absolutely. I mean, what's marriage? I mean, first of all, let's define marriage. So I mentioned very briefly at the beginning that I went to law school and I was a lawyer for overnight. I was a lawyer. I jokingly say I was overnight because not that long. And then I went back into law firms and worked in the management of law firms and big law firms in the United States. So from a legal standpoint, we don't have legal marriage we don't have laws in that respect on the other side. Okay. Just, I say that jokingly, but seriously, just in case, we want to dispense with that in case you were wondering. No, but I'm sure what Kirk is referring to is the emotional, the connection between the two souls who are married and connected and love each other on this side. And can that continue on the other side? Absolutely, yes. Absolutely. Yeah. That's an easy, short answer. Yeah.
Okay, and the second part of his question states, my religious tradition focuses on sin, worthiness, righteousness as prerequisites to receiving an eternal reward in heaven. I have now heard of a life review, which apparently does not focus on sin per se, but learning from past behaviors. What place does obedience and righteousness have in the afterlife?
Wow, this is about 12 questions there, Kirk, and they're really good questions. Thank you for asking that. I mean, let's say Anne Marie, I'm going to let you be you're going to be my monitor or scribe or whatever. You're going to kind of keep track of me.
Sure.
See if I cover them all. But first of all, punishment. There is no punishment on the other side. There's no structural punishment. So let me define this very clearly to everybody. So what do I mean when I say there's no structural punishment? What I mean by that is that there is no place that you have to go to if you've done bad things. There's no system that you have to go through that exists structurally. That's why I use the word structural. There's no infrastructure. There's no level that you got to go to first before you graduate. There's no levels on the other side. You hear people talk about levels a lot. Those are people who believe in levels. So when they go to the other side, might they run into a bunch of people who have created a bunch of levels? Yeah. So then they come back or they talk to a medium and the medium says, yeah, there's levels on the other side. Well, for those people there are, just like there are levels on this side for some people who believe in levels. How many people have ever been in a spiritual community here where there's like a hierarchy in the spiritual community? How many people have ever been in a city council meeting where there's a political, levels and hierarchy and so forth? There's all kinds of hierarchies on planet Earth. Does that mean that planet Earth is a place where inherently in the structure of going to planet Earth, there's a whole bunch of hierarchies that everybody has to go through? No. In the same way, that's what I mean on the other side. There's no structural way that heaven exists that there's some structural punishment in that way. Could you be punished on the other side? Yes. How would that happen? That would happen not because God or Jesus or anybody is saying you messed up and we're going to punish you. It would happen because you ran into people who you were cruel to and you hurt on this side, and you might run into them on the other side and they're never going to forget you did that, right? So people say, is there karma? To use the Vedic word. So I know the person who's asking this, I think, is it Kirk still? Who's asking?
Yeah, Kirk. And by the way, Kelvin, you're doing a great job. This is Kirk. Thank you so much. Please continue.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you for saying that. I have to get some feedback that I'm at least resonating on some level, because if I'm not, then I'll change the approach of how I'm talking about things so that it kind of speak to that person a little bit better. So everybody should always feel free to give me feedback on that in real time like this. So it's they never forget. This is a forgiveness and love thing. There's a whole, I have essays on this in my purple book, my second book and so forth. There's lectures on my YouTube video you can watch for free, my YouTube video channel, my YouTube channel, you can watch for free. There's videos there about this idea of forgiveness and love. And we never forget. This whole, where did that, who came up with that? I mean, forgive and forget. I understand the general concept means let's move on. So I say, let's use correct English. Say let's move on. That's what we should be saying. Let's move on. But you're never going to forget what somebody did to you, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, quite frankly. And so that's where you could say punishment or recourse or consequences is a more neutral word that I like to use, which hits the nail right on the head. Yeah, there are consequences to our action. So I believe in karma in terms of consequences, but not karma in terms of some accounting system that exists in the universe that's somehow keeping track of who's naughty and who's nice, like a Santa Claus in the universe or something. No. There's nobody and no thing doing that other than each of us, and we never forget. And so, that's a whole separate discussion. I don't want to get into the cruelty discussion. We can go there another time or in another question. But obedience, Kirk mentioned the word obedience, and that is a really, really important concept that came out of the 30th November talk that George gave 8 years ago. And George did not have time to get into this much. So I'm expanding on what Jehovah wants us to talk about with this, okay? So George it's kind of funny. Those of you who've seen the talk, at the end, George kind of looks at his watch and he kind of goes, oh my God, he thought it was going to be 2 hours long. And he's like 3 hours into this, and he's not even done yet, okay? He's like, he had to quickly cover a whole bunch of major topics in the last 5 to 10 minutes, okay? So it's kind of funny in that respect because he couldn't see me waving to him because the lights were so bright and the 5 cameras and all this stuff, because we were all trying to wave to him, giving him time markers, and he couldn't see us. He told us afterwards he couldn't see us. Anyway, so let me expand on what George touched on briefly that Jehovah wants us to talk about. This notion of obedience to anybody, but most of you have you're probably either have a Christian background or an Islamic background, a Jewish background, and so forth. So you're familiar with who Jehovah or Allah or Yahweh is viewed at through those religious institutions. And I'm speaking to you, Kirk, because you mentioned that.
Thank you.
Come out of the Christian tradition. Okay, so Jehovah wants people to understand that while he may have allowed, this is Kelvin Chin paraphrasing now. This is not, I'm not channeling Jehovah or anything. This is like, I've had conversations with Jehovah about this, but I'm paraphrasing to put it into 21st century, easy to understand English, okay? While he may have allowed human beings over the millennia to view him as capital G God or Yahweh, Allah, etc., whatever nomenclature you want to use, he now wants people to understand that he sees that as, let's say, an omission. He's telling me to use the word omission. The omission on his part to not discourage that sooner. That's how he would wants us to language this. It is because he sees the obedience as leading people down this path of blindly following whoever, and it inculcates this devotion, this blind devotional aspect. And it's not just Jehovah, this happens in the Vedic culture with Hindu gods, et cetera, this blind devotion. Or it happens in the Vedic culture, not with gods, just with gurus, and the blind devotion to a guru viewed as a god or whatever. Just pick anybody, doesn't matter which tradition we're talking about here. The concept is that blind devotion or obedience to that being or that institution or that, body of thought, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a person. Discourages that individual seeker. We'll call that person, like you, Kirk, the seeker, that person who is seeking knowledge, who is seeking to live a truer life, a more happy, a more contented life, a more loving, less cruel life, down the path of potentially being hoodwinked by beings or institutions or groups of ideas that are not helpful and that may be hurtful. It actually, he said, he now sees that it can lead to people being more prone to being abused. So a loving being like Jehovah, the way I look at it, this is Kelvin Chin talking now. The way I look at it is a loving being like Jehovah, much less risky than the guy down the street telling you that you should be following him or her.
Right.
Male or female, doesn't matter. Right? Okay. Does that answer your question?
It does, and it's consistent with my experience. And yet I was so taught that obedience is the first law of heaven. And so I'm fighting against that. And then the other thing is fascinating. You're following my train of thinking. My third question, you will see that you were anticipating it. But go ahead.
Go ahead and why don't you ask it? What was the third part?
Well, my third question is, I asked, is the end goal of eternal life to ever increase in vibration and energy to become something of an ascended master? If so, is this like climbing the corporate ladder such that the higher you are on the organization chart, the better off you are?
The short answer is no.
Okay.
Here's the nuanced answer. Okay, that's the short answer. Yeah, the nuanced answer is, can we develop over time? And eternity just means no beginning, no end. Okay,
Sure.
As I defined earlier, it's eternity is that which is uninfluenced by the continuum of change. Okay, but over time, in that continuum of change, which lasts forever, can we develop and evolve? Yes, we can. Must we? No. So there's no have-tos here. There's only choices. And so me personally, I choose to grow and evolve and learn from my mistakes and stupid stuff I've done and, and things that I can improve upon and so on and so on over the many, many, many lifetimes that I've had. And I only remember a couple of dozen, who knows how many I'm not remembering that I've blocked out, Kirk, because I don't want to remember that, we all do that. But the thing is there potential for growth? Absolutely, yes. Does somebody absolutely have to grow? No. This whole notion that Earth is a school, that's just a bunch of beings on the other side, a lot of angels, not all of them, but there's a big group of angels on the other side who have that belief, and they're like school. I call them the school marm group. What school marm is? It's like,
yeah.
Did you do your homework? You gotta go. Go sit in the corner. You didn't do your homework. It's like a school marm. It's like somebody, It's like, no, those aren't the kind of beings on the other side that I hang out with. It's like, okay, yeah, fine. But some people are really into like being told what to do. And the school marms have they got lots of subjects. They got lots of followers. But no, structurally, no. The path is clear for everybody to journey down in their lives however they want to. That's the bottom line.
Are there cliques or groups or societies in the afterlife that people either gravitate to or hang out with, like we experience in contemporary Earth society?
It's a really good question. So I'm going to answer your question in this one sentence. We can talk about it in more detail in a second.
Sure.
But here's the one sentence answer that I give sometimes in my Afterlife series that I teach. There's less difference between this side and the other side than people realize.
Huh.
Less difference between this side and the other side than people realize. Now, there's obviously difference. We don't have a biological body. We don't have to feed it, clothe, and all that stuff. Okay, fine.
Sure.
And all that stuff we already talked about in this session earlier. We don't have a, it's a field of light. Okay, you don't have, you can touch the, you can kind of touch things and kind of feel like you're touching. It's kind of like, you know what it's like? It's not the same as, but it's analogous to. What dreams are light experiences, really, they are. Some people will say, well, it's just your imagination, Well, what is that? That's all this certain neurosynaptic stuff that's going on in your brain, even just from a science standpoint. Forget about from a more abstract consciousness standpoint. Just from a science standpoint, you could say that, well, your mind is light. Okay?
Yeah.
Neurosynapses and this and that, electrical connections and all that. That's light. Well, okay. Well, it's similar to dreaming in the sense, right? Because dreaming, if that's what all this light experience is going on in dreams, I get in cars in dreams. I remember a dream I had, I don't know, it was last year or something like that. For some reason, this dream sticks out of my mind. I was in a restaurant, and I got out of the restaurant, and I went to this, was it a blue or a green? It was either blue-green or a blue-green, like 1950s car. Yeah. My mother had a blue-green 1950s car. They didn't make blue-green, turquoise 1950s cars. My mother, who is, as a side note, some of you guys actually on here knew my mother, was very artistic, and she actually had a custom painted 1952 Pontiac, custom turquoise, bright turquoise. Anyway, so maybe I was making a connection there in my dream a year ago, whatever. But I was getting into it like a 1950s car that was not the car that I grew up with. It was a different car out of a restaurant. Now I'm getting I'm having this experience. This is a real experience I'm having in my dream, Kirk, right? Walking out of the restaurant, I walk across the parking lot. I can still picture it in my mind. And then there's this hill, like a parking lot. It was like a rise to the driveway to get up to the main road and so forth. Out of this big parking lot where the restaurant was, and I'm not in a physical car, but does my mind think I am at that time? Yeah, we're not dreaming on the other side. It's like this side, except it visually is like a dream. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Kind of different dimension or
different, but real. But not biological and
okay.
dense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you, Kelvin. I've taken up too much of your time, but this is
great, really good question. Really good question.
Thank you.
Yeah, this whole back to your point about the ascended master thing. You hear this ascended master thing all the time. When I hear that, I kind of go, I just roll my eyes, because it's like Jesus does not view himself as an ascended master. Lots of other people do. All right. Shankara, who, for those of you who know about Vedic tradition, Shankara, this is the Shankaracharyas, which is an honor, which is a political, religious, spiritual, honorific seat. Charya means seat. Shankara is his name. It's in honor of Shankara. There's these 4 seats in India: the north, south, east, and west. Shankaracharyas. It's in a spiritual, like a very renowned spiritual leader is, I don't know the political structure, if they're voted for or chosen or whatever it works, but whatever. You get this. The point is that he doesn't view himself, Shankara, as an ascended master. Okay, so we are all. That's a major message that comes out of the 30th November, is this notion of life as an eternal democracy. In other words, flatten it out, get rid of all this hierarchical thinking that really is widespread existent on the other side, this hierarchical. You think it's hierarchical on this side? It's more hierarchical on the other side.
Oh my gosh.
If you think about it, it kind of makes sense. What do you got to do on the other side? But other than think, I want to go to the beach, and then you're at the beach.
Sure.
Think I'm going to eat a hot dog right now, and you're not really eating a hot dog, but you're eating it's like you have a light, a hot dog made of light, and you can kind of imagine what the mustard and the ketchup tastes like, and you can relish and whatever, you can imagine that, but it's not exactly the same, right? But so after a while, people are going to go, well, I can do all this. I need to have more fun. They start creating. This is a long time. This is like millions of years, jillions of years.
Sure.
This is like probably there is no, I don't know that there's a beginning and an end to heaven either, but this has been going on for a long time is my point. I'm not just saying this is like last year this happened. They come up with these hierarchies, and over time it's just developed. On the other hand, here, yeah, we have hierarchies here on planet Earth, but we have a lot of other really cool distractions we can do. We have a biological body that really immerses us into our experiences in a different way than our mind alone can immerse ourselves into on the other side. So I really like to kind of equalize this thinking about the other side and this side. I get it. Look, I've been through some struggles, financial struggles myself several times in this lifetime as Kelvin Chin. Okay, 20th century, 21st century planet Earth. I get it. It's challenging at times, but I want to teach people how much more it is this equalization of this side and the other side in terms of our ability to do things, and how much more we can do there, and how much more we can do here that we can't do there, and that we can do there that we can't do here. It's really much more. There's much more an equality there of opportunity. We'll say an equal opportunity situation than people realize, because I get it. We get so downtrodden sometimes with some of the emotional and physical and financial and relational burdens that we have here, right? I get it. But back to this Ascended Master thing, out of the 30th November talk is one of the major takeaways was this notion of friendship, that we think of each other more as friends. And Jehovah and Jesus and John the Baptist, Shankara, all these, Swami Brahmananda Saraswati and others, Yogananda, Swami Paramahansa Yogananda has come to me a number of times. There are many Buddhist leaders, etc., as well, who were not mentioned in the 30th November talk when George spoke, because they've come to us separately since. Want us to think of them more as friends, not worship, not divinity. That's the getting rid of this hierarchical stuff, the divinity and the obedience point that you so appropriately brought up, right?
Thank you much.
You're very welcome. Yeah. What else you got in, Marie?
Kim asked, is there demons or the devil?
There's no such thing as demons and devil in the way that institutions make you think and make you afraid of. All right. There are, again, this goes to the point of there's more similarity between this side and the other side than people realize. Okay. So are there good and bad people here on this side? Yes, of course, we know there are. Are there good and bad people on the other side? Sure, yes. Can you get away from them a lot faster on the other side than this side? Yes, because you are a light being. You are made of light. You don't have to get into a car, an airplane, a helicopter, or a bicycle, or whatever, a vehicle. You don't have a you don't have a physical vehicle that you have to carry around like you do on this side, right? So you don't want to hang out with somebody who's annoying you. You say, see you later, boom, and you're across the other side of the galaxy or whatever. You know, I don't know how fast we can travel on the other side, but my experience with communicating with beings and having visitations and so forth over the last 35 years is that we can travel really fast and seem as if in more than one place at the same time, but we're not. Because because you still have the time and place issue that Cayman helped us bring up earlier, right? So why does it seem like you can be in more than one place sometimes? Or why can you get away so fast? How fast can you get away? I don't know. I don't know if anybody's done a stopwatch, anybody on the other side, and timed them on the, on a 400-yard dash. It would probably have to be, instead of the 40, it'd probably be up to 4,000 because you can travel so fast with a 40,000. Because light can travel how fast? I don't know if you guys have ever Googled this. I've Googled this for teaching purposes. I've Googled this. 696 or 694 million miles per hour. So we can round that off to 700 million miles per hour is the speed of light. Right now, I have a ring light here that's, it's the light that's traveling off of your laptop is traveling at 700 million miles per hour to get to your eyes. How fast does that get there? 700 million. So to give you a sense of how fast that is, going around the equator of planet Earth, which is approximately 24,000 miles around the largest part of planet Earth, you could get around planet Earth 8 times in 1 second, going 700 million miles per hour. 1/8 of a second to get around the equator, or 8 times in 1 second. Either way, it's the same thing. You can travel really crazy fast. Now, I don't know if you can go 700 million miles per hour, but what if you had a slow energy body, and like you could only go half the speed of light? Oh, excuse me. You can only go 350 million miles per hour. It's like if somebody's annoying you, you can get away from them really fast. I'm seriously mean this. So the other thing is that there is some level of organization on the other side that some of our friends have, we'll say, pre-organized for some of us. The Jehovah and Jesus have, let's say, pre-organized. The way I view it, again, you've heard me say this before today. I'm the 21st century lingo guy. So it's kind of like a hotel, a huge hotel with a bunch of ballrooms in it, like huge, like ginormous ballrooms in it, where it's like, oh, these are the more spiritually oriented people who are not into religious organizations. Oh, this is the people who are more into religious organizations. And people kind of hang out with people who are more like-minded, because heaven is really a place of rejuvenation. It's not a place to be going over and fighting with each other. It's more of a place of rejuvenation. You want to test out theories, and you want to see if that works or not work. That's what we kind of play around with here on planet Earth. The other side is a place of rejuvenation. It's a place of fun. Just chill out, travel around the galaxy, see different places, go sightseeing, connect with your old loved ones on the other side, and keep in mind, when I say old loved ones, don't just think of obviously it's your family and loved ones from this lifetime, but how many dozens or maybe hundreds or maybe thousands, I don't know, how many lifetimes that you've had. Each of us, we've had, different number of lifetimes as a human. I have had lifetimes as an animal as well. But let's just talk about our human lifetimes. How many thousands or hundreds or dozens, at least, maybe, of lifetimes have you had as a human? All of those friends from those other lifetimes who you didn't connect with in this past lifetime on 20th century or 21st century Earth. There's a lot, okay? There's a lot of fun to be had, is my point. It's vacation mode on the other side. It's rest and rejuvenation mode on the other side for the most part. So does that answer that person's question? Yeah.
Kim, good? She says good. Okay.
Yeah, good.
Quentin asks, is the Christmas story as written in the Bible accurate? Did Jesus actually resurrect after his death?
Oh, did he resurrect after his death? Yes. Many of us saw him. And some of you may have seen him, actually. Many of the people who, Sharon just put in the chat, she said, yes, he did. Sharon remembers seeing him back then too. So, so a number of us remember seeing him, and some of you may have been there as well, because we guesstimate, some of us, nobody was doing head counts, but we guesstimate that there were probably 500 to 1,000 people who saw him. Now, I don't know what the number is, but lots of people. It wasn't just like a small group of us kind of a thing. That's what I want to kind of I'm into demystifying the mystical, just in general, and I want to try to kind of I think it was Kirk's question about this hierarchy thing. I want to kind of, I'm famous for making up words that don't exist, but I want to kind of de-hierarchize this whole thinking about these stories, that it was only the 12 apostles who went out and taught and all this. It's like, no, there were like 20 or 30, 40, 50 of us, and there were men and women. It wasn't just guys. But who's writing the Bible? It's a bunch of guys. So what do you think they're going to make? They're just going to make it more like male-oriented and stuff. It's like annoying. I find that annoying. But anyway, but it's like, I'm annoyed with them, not with you, but annoyed with these, these guys who pulled together these biblical stories. Some of them are just made up stories, but some of them are accurate, and some of them are just like this, like omissions, like women. Where are the women? How about talking about the women who are out teaching with us? Okay, so forth. So, but to de-hierarchize this new word, and because many of you were there too. Many of you were there and witnessed the fact that he did resurrect and he visited us. He came and lectured to 500 or 1,000 people on a hillside. His light body came. And then some of us, he met with us, he probably came back, George and I guesstimate, like 10 or 12 times, something like that. 8 to 10 to 12 times, something like that. He came back multiple. It wasn't just like once. Oh, he came once or twice or whatever. Or he came and he walked with Simon Peter, and he walked with Simon Peter and Andrew, or then he came and walked with John, is one of his favorite apostles, John, because he had been with John in other lifetimes. They had worked together on other projects in previous lifetimes, Jesus and John. So they knew each other before the Jesus lifetime and so forth. So yes, he did resurrect, and it just like any of you. This was the teaching point. Why did he come back so many times? Because one of the main objectives of the John the Baptist Jesus project that got derailed, because as you guys know the story, John got beheaded, and then it's like Herod and Herod's wife, and then Herod's his daughter was Herod's wife's daughter. Anyway, Salome, I think is her name, how you pronounce it. Anyway, he said, "You want his head? What do you want for your brother?" Head on a platter, and then John get beheaded, and so the whole project starts getting derailed, and then Jesus gets crucified. These were all mistakes in the plan, and mistakes. Maybe a too wrong word. It was not planned for, is what I mean. Okay. So if from the planning standpoint, yeah, it was a mistake, that shouldn't have happened, but it did happen, and it derailed the plan. And so Jesus, when he saw what was starting to happen politically amongst, there were three there was really three different, you could call them groups involved in the crucifixion, in the decision-making of the crucifixion of Jesus. There was in their free will choices. When I say involved, their free will choices were obviously the priests who were threatened, and then you have Pontius Pilate, the Roman, involvement and so forth, and then you have the masses of people who were demanding that Jesus be king of the Jews. Jesus had no interest in being king of the Jews or king of anything. He was a teacher. And so when he saw that starting to happen, the confluence of those three groups, the power of their free will thinking, changing the course of history, you could say, and creating and seeing that he was going to get crucified, he changed the objective to overcoming the fear of death, which in using his crucifixion to alter and speed up. That was always part of the plan. So that wasn't a change in the overall soul plan that the group had, that we had, but that was a change. He kind of had to accelerate how he was going to be teaching overcoming the fear of death, how he and John the Baptist were going to be teaching overcoming the fear of death. He had to accelerate that because he was getting killed. So he saw that happening. He used that as the resurrection and the multiple appearances as a teaching opportunity. But my point to you, again, in this idea of the life as being an eternal democracy, and my de-hierarchization of all this stuff, is to demonstrate what he was trying to demonstrate was that all of us are resurrected when we die. That is the structure of what happens when a biological body ceases to exist and what we call physically dies. That is what happens, is a resurrection of the soul. In other words, it continues, and it becomes an energy body, just like he demonstrated to us on planet Earth by coming back and showing us his energy body and speaking to us and coming to us. And some of you have had that experience with your dead loved ones or dead friends or whoever. You've had your own visitations, you know what I'm talking about. But in the framework of the language of resurrection, Jesus was demonstrating that we are all resurrected, not just Jesus. That became a religious thing to make Jesus the center of Christianity, and Paul is the person who started the derailment of that. And there were many others, Justin the Martyr, Tertullian, and others over the next 100 to 300 years after Jesus died and after Paul died. But Paul got it started, that whole notion of what we know now as Christianity today. Sharon has a question. She's wanted to comment. Why don't you put her on screen with me, Henry?
Yeah, she wants to make a comment on resurrection.
Yeah, and you just kind of alluded to that as well. And as a bereavement counselor, and I work for the tail end of hospice, the biggest question, people come and say is, am I going crazy? I saw, my dead loved one, I saw them, I heard them, I felt them. And of course, in social work parlance, it's called, and I'm not really thrilled with the latter terminology, is bereavement hallucinations. However, the resurrection sounds very familiar to those who have experienced, seeing. I could have sworn that he or she passed by my bedroom. I smelt their Old Spice. I heard my grandmother's voice. I smelt her rose perfume. I saw the outline of her shadow. I recognized it as being her or him. Sounds like the Jesus story. But then we kind of put it on a pedestal to say, well, that was a very, very special bereavement hallucination, and we call it resurrection. Whereas I actually, see it as just that's just something that happens, and that can happen to many of us that have had loved ones who have crossed over. I've heard that story again and again.
Beautiful, beautiful, Sharon. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's exactly these.
So it's the normalizing it,
Exactly.
the normalization. Yeah. Oh yeah, you saw your love. Oh yeah, that sounds familiar. You know.
We read each other's minds. I was going to say it's the normalization of the process. That's it. That's what Sharon's talking about. This should be normal. This was the intent 2,000 years ago of the John the Baptist Jesus Project. The soul plan that was discussed before they came in was to promote what Sharon just described, the normalization of the dying, the death, this whole notion of death. It's a normal expiration of the physical biological body and the normal continuation of the soul, spirit, mind, consciousness, however you want to label it, right? And it continues. And if you want to call that resurrection, you can call that resurrection. To me, and as Sharon just beautifully described, it's just the normal continuation of life. Life is eternal. Our soul, the life of our soul is eternal. That was the message. That was the teaching message that got derailed by Paul, but that was the teaching message of Jesus and the initial intent of John the Baptist to plow the field for Jesus and so forth, and for them to work together. That was the plan, is that they were both going to...
Yes. The message by Paul to make it all only very exclusive to only a few.
Exactly. Yeah. And Paul, a lot of people don't realize, and this is historically accurate, and you read any of these religious historians who don't have a political agenda, who have only just researched it from the Greek documents written by Paul and so forth. Paul was an end of the world believer. He was an apocalypse believer. He preached that the world was going to end in 6 weeks from that moment he was talking to the group. He said the world is going to end in 6 weeks, and he just kept moving it. But they tend to do. They keep moving the goalpost, right? And it's going to end in 6 weeks, so don't get married and don't buy property. He explicitly told people that. That was part of his teaching. And therefore, because it's going to end in 6 weeks, you need to believe that this man who just died on the cross died for your sins. And because if you believe that, then you will go to the head of the line and get to this beautiful place called heaven. So as Sharon just said, he made it an exclusive club. This is my 21st century Kelvin Chin language. Paul made it's like you're joining an exclusive club. And you don't have to pay a membership fee other than just believe that guy died for your sins, and you'll go to the head of the line. And so, and by the way, the world's going to end in 6 weeks, so don't bother doing anything except be a believer and have faith in what I just told you. And that became what we know now known as Christianity. I called him to the mat on this in about 48-ish AD. We're not sure, 12, 15 years after Jesus died. And we heard that Paul was doing this because we had taught Paul what Jesus' teachings what Jesus' teachings were. And he went out and we thought was teaching them, and he came up with this whole notion and started derailing things. And we called him back to Jerusalem. James did. James was Jesus's brother. James was the head of the Jerusalem church, and James was kind of our leader in that sense. And he said, everybody come back. And so it took us a while, because we're traveling 50, 75, 100 miles, and you're walking most of the way, right? You're walking, it's like, how long does it take you? Or maybe if you're lucky, you get a ride on the back of somebody's donkey cart, or, whatever, but after a week or two, we all kind of convened back in Jerusalem, and we called Paul to the mat and said, hey, you got to stop doing this. This is not the teaching that we told you that Jesus was teaching. This is not the teaching. And so get with the program and teach about these ideas, overcoming the fear of death, the continuation and so forth, that everybody continues, not just this special group that you're talking about. And he agreed with us. I was very angry with him, and he agreed with us, and he went out, and we know historically he lied to us, and he continued teaching what he taught. So it's important to understand the normalcy of this transitioning that we have in this last 5 minutes. We got another question, Henry?
We have two. We have one long one and one short one. Which one would you like to address?
Oh, it doesn't matter to me. Let's
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
wait.
Gene's next, and he says, I've been seeing the idea of the universe, multiverse, being made up of varying frequencies, the lower frequencies corresponding to physical reality as we understand it, the higher frequencies corresponding to realities that we are in, but cannot see because we are not vibrating at that frequency. That meditating helps us to vibrate our mind at frequencies that allow us to communicate and participate in the afterlife, a higher frequency. Is this how you understand it?
Yes and no. So I would say, generally speaking, yes. But the no part is whenever I see the word, hear the word, or see the word, read the word or hear it, higher, I kind of go, ugh. Because higher implies lower. And in English language, higher usually implies better, and lower usually implies worse. And so I use the word different. That would be the fine tuning, tweaking, Gene. I would say to that we're operating at different frequencies, and that it's not a better frequency. You could say a faster frequency, maybe a faster vibratory energy frequency, or a not as fast. That's, to me, more neutral language. I stay away from higher and lowers. People talk about higher consciousness. I say there's no such thing. There's no such thing, because there's no such thing in terms of establishing a baseline of whose consciousness is what, So, but yeah, different frequencies, Gene, I'd say, yeah, that would be an accurate way of describing it. Just like a dog can hear different frequencies than a human, right? Is the dog smarter than a human because the dog can hear that different frequency of that? You blow on a dog whistle, and you and I go, I don't hear anything. I don't hear anything, and you're driving the dogs nuts. Does that mean the dogs are smarter? So somebody might use the phrase, well, the dogs can hear a higher frequency than the humans, all right? People are probably not going to default and hear that and think, oh, dogs must be smarter than humans. But some people might. So I tend to like to use the word different, because there's more of a propensity for people to think that it's better on the other side, where the frequency, if you use the word higher, Gene, than here. I would just say it's vibrating at a different frequency. And the other reason I also like to stay away from the higher and lower, and to kind of, again, I'm using that same word I made up, the de-hierarchize this, I can't say the word, but to more level the playing field. To more level the playing field in terms of this is why? Because I am all about promoting, to Sharon's great point, the normalcy of all of these experiences. And it's not just special people with special gifts, who've eaten special food, who've done special rituals, who've done special meditations, who can experience the normalcy of what Sharon just described to us so beautifully, right? It's the normalcy. And so the energy shifting and the ability to experience the other side, I want to encourage the normalcy of that. Because look, I think the reality of what Sharon just described has happened a lot more than anybody in the media is aware of, any of us in the public population is aware of, because people don't talk about it, because people pathologize it. They'll tell the doctor, and the doctor saying, I think you should be on this medication. And then they're giving them some meds for having had what I would refer to as a very normal, natural spiritual experience of a loved one who just died. All right. And so I think there's a lot more out there in the world who have experienced stuff like this, who have not, it's socially not accepted, or they might be actually explicitly afraid to talk about it with people for that reason. Okay. We want to normalize this. I think we're kind of at our end here.
We have one more question if you'd like to address it, or.
Okay, one more. We'll take one more and then we'll call.
Okay.
Because
Can our mind travel by,
we're going to do this monthly, people, remember. So bring your more questions to the next session. We do it in another month, you know? Think about other questions and bring them. Go ahead.
can our mind travel by dreams to see our future?
Can our mind travel by dreams to see our future? Well, here's the thing. So our mind can travel, whether it's dreams or in waking state, it doesn't really matter. Whether you're in dreams, meditation, waking state, because as I said, there's a fluidity, what I was just implying in my last statement, but there's a normalcy and a fluidity of our consciousness, and that Sharon kind of described to us too. All right. That said, can we see our future? The short answer is, well, the accurate answer is yes and no. All right. The short answer is yes, we can see probabilities of our future, but there is no absolute future. So that's a really important point to get your mind around, because there's nothing that absolutely is going to happen in your future other than what is going to happen. How are you going to know that? You're not going to absolutely know that. But can you foresee, and have I foreseen sometimes at times my future? Yeah. Over a discrete period of time. You know, it has to be a short period of time, because I'm perceiving probabilities. And that's what people, and that's what mediums are perceiving, are probabilities. And the sooner the event, let's just say it this way, the sooner the event that the medium of the person or that you are seeing is going to happen, the sooner it's going to happen, the more likely you're going to be accurate in your foretelling of your future, because the probabilities aren't as vast number of of choices that may happen by you and by other minds that may affect your future, because it's happening very soon. Okay? Like if it's happening in a matter of a few hours or a few minutes, a few days, versus a year or 5 years or 10 years or 15 years from now, that's way too far out in the future for somebody to say very, very specifically that this absolutely will happen, because they might be right, but the likelihood of them being wrong is magnified. Why? Because it's not just about your choices, it's about all the other people you may interact with, or not even interact with, but indirectly have effect on you. Because the congressmen and the Congress, the people in Congress, the men and women in Congress who making laws may change things in such a way over the next 10, 15, 20 years that has a very material, substantial effect on your life that could have affected that choice that you were going to, that some medium told you and that foresaw the future about. All right. So just giving Congress people as an example, because people you don't even know, who aren't even in your part of the world, can affect you. People in other countries can affect in a very, very indirect way. But the farther out it is, the longer that has an effect, the longer that has to take an effect in your life, even though indirect, right? The sooner it is, the less chance those farther out kind of things that can affect you have time to affect you. Does that make sense? Does that answer the person's question?
Yeah, Joy? Yes, she says
Yeah.
yes.
Good.
Great.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. So maybe if there's other questions, Anne Marie, you can save those. All right, we print
Okay.
those out, and if the person cannot come to the next session in a month, we'll answer them anyway. All right, and if you have questions, you can always email them to me. My email, there's a couple of ways you can email it to me. You can email it to me on your Zoom registration or whatever emails you got there. That my email address is on there. You can shoot me an email. That's my personal email, but that's fine. Or you can go to kelvinchin.org and send me a message on the contact page. Okay. Either way, if you cannot make it to the next session, and you can email me questions and we'll answer them that way too. All right. But great. Thank you so much for coming. And hopefully this has been helpful. That's why I'm doing this every month, and they're free. They're ongoing. They can be free forever. Every 30th of the month at 12 o'clock Pacific time, we're going to just have an open forum like this. You come and ask questions. Okay. In the meantime, if you haven't watched the 30th November talk given by George Hammond, go to that website, 30thnovember.com, watch that, and then come with any questions you have about that as well. Okay. Or any other questions about the afterlife. Thank you so much. And thank you, Sharon, and others for sharing. And it's really great to see everybody. All right. Take care.
Thanks, Kelvin.
See ya.